Hello everyone and welcome to .NET Core Central. In today's video, I am going to continue my discussion of fundamentals of C# programming language, and today's video will be mainly focused on for and for each loop. Loop is another programming concept which is very critical for any programming language, because we use loop to loop over an array of item. So in my last video I discussed about arrays. So in these videos the for and for each will naturally fit into the flow of the programming. So when we have an array of item, going through each item to do some operation, or in some cases initializing the items in an array, can become really tedious, and that is where the for and for each loop comes in play. So first let's see how the for loop works. So I'll go back to my example of the array of an int. Now here I manually declared, but let's say if we just declared the array or defined the array but not declaration, and declaring by hand is, as I mentioned, it's pretty tedious. So this is where the for each loop or for loop can come in handy. In this case for loop, because we are trying to initialize the array. So for is declared, as you can see, it's a for statement, and then we start with an integer value which is nothing but an initializer. So first we start with that, so we can say var count is equal to 0, and then the count is less than whatever the length of the array, so we can say count is less than values dot length, and this section is known as the condition. This is the condition for the for loop. As long as this condition is not met, the program is going to execute in a loop, and as soon as this condition is met, it is going to come out of this loop. So that is the reasoning behind having a condition. Now for this condition to be successful and then getting out at some point in time, we have to ensure that this for loop does not run in an infinite condition. And how to make sure that that happens? So that this is not true at every single point in time, right? And the only way to make it true if the count becomes more than the length, and the only way to make it more than the length if we increment the count. Now we can increment one at a time, or we can have plus equal to 2 or 3, whatever we want, we can do that, but that depends on the problem statement. In here, for this specific example, we are trying to fill an array of 10 items, so it makes sense to have count plus plus, which is increment by 1, and till it is the length of the array, and we are starting at 0 because array start with a 0 index. So this one makes sense for this scenario. And here we can say values of count is equal to count, or if we want to have like a multiplier of 10, we can have 10, or whatever we want to fill. So this is how for works. And as I mentioned earlier, that for each and for is critical for dealing with an array of item, an array of any type. It can be integer, or it can be an object, or whatever. So here, for example, if we consider this case, we can do similarly. We can say for, and we can say var count is equal to 0, count less than item dot length, and count plus plus. And here we can go, here the count is, the item is already declared, so we don't have to declare it. So we can do something like console dot write line item of count dot, it has a name, so we can print out the name of the item, or if we want to print out the address, we can print out the address. But using the for loop, as you can see, we can iterate through the item and then we can extract the value and do any operation that we want. That is the fundamental use case for a for loop. And same holds true for each. The difference between for loop and for each loop is for each loop can be run on any instance which implements either IEnumerable or IEnumerable of t, because when we do a for each loop, it essentially calls the get enumerator to get an enumerator from the item array and then pass and go to the next one. So that is why it uses the move next internally, which will move to the next property and then so on and so forth. So for this example, if we had to use for each loop, it's going to be much more simpler, because we can say for each and we can save our item in items, and then we can do the same thing. We can do console dot write line and here item dot name. As you can see, in this case we do not have to deal with the integer, incrementing it and using the indexer of the array to get the value out. Here we are just dealing with an enumerator, so we are just getting the object back. So here item is nothing but the object that is returned from this array. So this is where for each loops come very handy. But there are scenarios where you might have to deal with the count, deal with the index and figure out something, in which case for loop is better. But if you're just extracting the value and from the value you are just doing some operation, in that case for each is more suitable. So as you can see, using for and for each loop, the main fundamental need for the for and for each loop is to iterate through an array. Now the iteration can be needed for two fundamental purposes. One purpose is to iterate and fill the value of an array, and the other purpose is to iterate and do some operation on the value which is already been set externally. So the value can be set externally from a client input or a web service response, whereas setting the value ourselves might be in a case where we're getting the data from database and we have to set it to an array. Both the use cases can be covered through for or for each based on the scenario. So that is all I wanted to cover for today's video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you are new to my channel and you think you are getting value out of my channel, please subscribe to my channel. And thanks so much for watching this video.